Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mr. Jardine, and I work at DQRBA here in Dutching. We are a Cambridge International School, and at the moment we are a very cold school. It's quite a cold day today. Today I thought I would chat about Paper 2, Question 1, which is called Directed Writing. Previously we covered the writer's effect, which is a hard question in paper 1, and this is one of the questions in paper 2, which students can also find somewhat difficult. So I'm going to take you through some slides and discuss some of the broad ideas behind it. Obviously, we are limited in the ability to cover the content in detail, but hopefully it will be of some use to those of you who are watching at home. So what is directed writing? It's a 40-mark task, and paper 2 is an 80-mark exam. So it counts for 50% of your paper 2, and combined with paper 1, that counts for 25% of your final grade. So it is quite an important question in the exams. It can make or break an A star, or even a B. This is one of those questions that you do need to excel in, and there are strategies to excel in it if you study hard for it. In the exam, you have to read. Usually, there's one or two texts. More regularly, there are 2 texts that you have to read and base what you are writing on those 2 texts. And there are 3 kinds of text types you can write. You will be asked to write in. So you might be asked to write a speech, an article in the style of a magazine article, a kind of editorial, or you might be asked to write a letter. Usually these letters are of the formal or semi-formal type. And then you also need to be paying attention to the specifications in terms of the audience and the purpose. And ultimately, it's a test of your reading ability. You're having to read the 2 texts. And it's also a test of your writing ability, of course. We're checking for the style that you're writing in, the accuracy of vocabulary, that you're able to structure your response well, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and obviously your tone. And so let's have a look. Let's get into this a bit more. So the first thing I would like to, one of the broad things I would like to talk about is one of the things that we need to keep in mind about how these are marked. Okay, and there will be a particular focus later on in this presentation on the evaluation and the development, these 2 ideas. Okay, but as we said, this is a reading and writing task. So one of the things that the examiners are looking for is that you have a good knowledge of the text, that you can identify the required explicit and implicit details, and the implicit ones are the ones that maybe you're going to struggle with a little bit more. Excuse me. The implicit ones are sorry, that's our technician is on hand here at the moment. Sorry, to get back to this, explicit and implicit details. So explicit are the details that are the writer of the text has put in writing. They are the facts and the opinions of the writer that are explicitly stated, as in the writer is not hiding what they are thinking. It is directly there in the text to be seen. Implicit details can be thought of as hidden. We have a saying in English to read between the lines. Okay, and this is one of those moments where you need to read between the lines. There are ideas that the writer is putting forward, and this is happening all the time when we write. There are ideas that get put forward that are not explicitly stated in words, and rather are a kind of hidden meaning within what is being said. And we need to bring ourselves, our understanding of what they are saying in order to grasp at this implied meaning. Okay, so it's very important that we deal with these details in what we are going to write, out our speech or magazine article or letter. But today I'm going to focus a little bit more on the idea of evaluation and development. And these are words that I think should be familiar to many of you. To evaluate something, if you are to evaluate an idea, you are checking about how good or bad it is. Okay, you are trying to weigh up the opinions, whether you agree, whether you disagree. Okay, so evaluation is a judgment or a weighing up of ideas. It also requires you to show insight. English does require critical thinking skills. And this is one of the ways in which examiners can check your critical thinking, is that you can show insight into what this other writer is saying about a topic. Okay, and we will have a look at some examples of this a little bit later. The second one is development. And I like to think about this in terms of maybe a building developer. A building developer, or maybe more simply, a builder, okay, is somebody who takes what is given to them, bricks, concrete, rebar, steel, or whatever it might be, and uses those to build something more than just the individual pieces. Okay, so we are given some of the bricks and concrete that are in the text, the explicit and implicit details. And we are also required to extend upon these. Okay, we need to be careful about extending upon beyond those, what is directly stated in the text and applied within the text. We do not want to completely go off on a tangent that has no relation back to the text. Right? So you still need to be using the fundamental knowledge of building to build. You do not come up with a whole new system of building when you want to build a house. You need to use the fundamental knowledge and then develop from that. Okay. And we might also think about it as depth, right? If the text that we are provided with in the exam is the surface of the swimming pool, we also want to be able to see what is below the surface. Okay. We're not wanting to go to a different swimming pool, a whole new swimming pool with something completely different in it. We want to see what is below the surface of this swimming pool that the writer has given us. Right, so that is our broad understanding of evaluation and development. So some other key elements that we need to keep in mind that are particularly important for doing well at this task are these three things: understanding the audience and purpose, the structure and organization, and adopting appropriate language and style. So to go over these one by one, audience and purpose. We know that whenever we write something, we are writing towards another person, okay, or another group of people. And when we have a look at the example, we'll tell you who this audience is. Okay, so if we are to speak to a baby, we speak in a certain way. If we are to speak to our friend, we speak in a different way. If we are to speak to an adult, we speak in a different way to both of those other two, right? So humans, we do this instinctually. We change the way we speak depending on who we are speaking to. If a policeman pulls you over because you are speeding, you adopt a tone that might be more regretful and respectful of their authority. And so we always need to keep in mind the audience. right? And one of the main things that we talk about with audience is tone, the tone that you are using for this audience. The next one, purpose. There are three main purposes that we deal with in this task, and that is to be persuasive, to try and persuade someone to do something, to not do something, to agree with something, to not agree with something. Discursive, which is simply the presentation of information in a way that is easy for the audience to understand. And then to argue against something, to argue for something or argue against something. And here we are trying to deconstruct maybe the logic of a certain idea and make an argument against it or make an argument for it. Okay, so those are our three main purposes. Obviously, these purposes blend into one another a little bit. Of course, if you are to persuade someone, you need to provide them with information. The same goes with argument. If you are to argue for or against something, you need to also provide the information. Okay, but as they stand individually, a discursive essay just gives you the information, good, bad, this way, that way. Whereas the two on the side, the persuasive and argumentative, use the information for a particular X to try and create an argument or persuasion, right? Then structure and organization. All right, the first part of this is format. I'm not going to spend too much time on. Of course, when you write a letter, there's a particular format we prefer you to follow. All right, having addresses, having opening and closing salutations, maybe having a subject line that you've underlined, and then things, the usual, which you can see in many textbooks, English textbooks over and over again. Introductions, paragraphs, and conclusions. So that sort of stuff is all very much, it doesn't take a lot of thought, right? As to if you have seen a letter, you know what a letter looks like. If you can copy the kind of how it looks, then you are pretty much there in terms of the format. The thing that is more important to me that I find that a skill that students need to work more on and that I can bring more value to is this idea of deconstructing to reconstruct. This is something that also I will explain in terms of paper 1, the summary, question 2, right? In paper 1, you are given a text that you must summarize. And what students often do is they read the text. And as you know, we like to read from top to bottom. When we are dealing with, when we are reading, we read from top to bottom. And students see a point and they write that point down. They see the next point for the summary, they write that point down. And what ends up is their summary the points end up in the exact same order in which they found them within the text. And this shows the examiner that you are not thinking about how to reorganize the ideas from the original text. All right, so exercise that I do with my class is to number, when we are reading the text, we can number the points in the text. So for a summary, we might have 13 points. And then we can look at those different points and see where are the relationships between different points. Where are there areas of similarity? And then we can use the numbers to say, okay, I'm going to have point number 1, point number 5, point number 7, and point number 10. Those are going to be part of the first part of this summary. Okay, and so it breaks away from the original text, which is something the examiners want you to do. They want to show that you are thinking critically about how to organize this information. If you follow the text, there's no critical thought involved. So you need to take the points from the text, reorganize them, deconstruct the text to reconstruct it into something new. Okay, a very, very, very important thing to do. And on that point of summaries, there is a summary-like aspect to these. We are obviously having to summarize to a certain extent the ideas in this text for the directed writing that we're going to do. We need to synthesize that information, though, make it work within a new framework. All right, so that is organization. The last bit, adopting appropriate language and style. Here, tone comes up again. Okay, we know that we need to create a certain tone for a certain audience. We create tone through the language that we use. Okay, and the most basic way to think about tone is formal and informal. I don't think that always covers it. Okay, you can have a tone that is bubbly or a tone that is condescending. There are a lot of other adjectives we can use to describe tone. And we are not ultimately, we're not just trying to create formality or informality. We are trying to connect with another human when we are writing. If we are writing an application letter for a job, we are trying to connect with the employer. And so just being formal does not necessarily connect with the other person on the other side. Okay, so there's a need to create a sense of a character within yourself that you are bringing to the text through your language. Right, so that's tone. Also very important is rhetorical devices. Right, there are a litany of rhetorical devices. Right, everything from your figurative devices, metaphors, personification, similes, to things like repetition, syntax. There are a whole array of rhetorical devices that we can employ, and we must employ if we are to do well in this task, that help us create stronger writing. And stronger writing is important. It helps us achieve more in life generally. And then I put here good writing. I think it goes almost without saying. We need to have good writing. For a start, spelling, punctuation, and grammar. Of course, we're always checking for things like that. A side note on punctuation that I think many young writers struggle with is that punctuation does not begin and end with commas and full stops. Right? Punctuation at this level, you need to show an awareness of your colons, your semicolons, correct usage of an exclamation mark, ellipses. All right, there are a variety of punctuation. If you're going to be using direct speech, your quotation marks and using them correctly, all of that needs to be done well. But you need to be challenging yourself to use punctuation beyond the basic. Right, we need to move beyond commas and full stops, which many students get stuck at that stage of commas and full stops. So those are some of the key elements to keep in mind. And then a guideline for when you are sitting in the exam room, what should you do? Okay, this is a 2-hour exam. You all have to answer 2 questions. This question and the other question is your descriptive or narrative writing. And generally, the split needs to kind of be 1 hour for this, 1 hour for your descriptive and narrative. Okay, so it is quite challenging to fit in all you need to do in 1 hour. So the first thing I would encourage my students to do is to read the text twice. Right, this requires you to read at a good speed, but not at the speed where you're just skimming over it and not really getting anything from the text. Okay, you might kind of skim on the first read to get a basic idea of what you are dealing with across the 2 texts, but definitely on a second reading, you need to be paying much closer attention. If you are to find implicit details, you need to be reading between the lines, and that takes a little bit more time and thought when you are reading. Right? I encourage my students to underline as they go along. Right? But we're not underlining vocabulary we don't understand. You will come across vocabulary you don't understand. We are underlining the points, the ideas that we are looking for. Okay, and then to annotate. Annotation is a very important tool for this task. Right? As you are reading through this, you should be writing your own thoughts or maybe how this connects to other ideas within the text. You can be writing down some questions that come up for you as you read this, right? But basically, you want to be engaging your brain on the ideas as you're reading them. Reading should not be a mechanical task of reading, finding, underlining, and reproducing. This requires critical thinking. And so the annotation is a way to tap into your critical thinking. I remind my students that you cannot think if you do not have questions, right? So I often encourage them to ask questions. Write lots of questions next to the thing you are annotating that will help guide you towards saying something of purpose within your writing, right? So underline and annotate. You should plan. Again, time constraints are an issue. So you cannot do the same sort of planning you might have done during the year in class time, when you maybe spend 2 whole lessons just on the planning, just reading, getting to grips with the vocabulary, all the ideas, having class discussions. You don't have the time for that. So you need to be, you need to have some organizing tools. For myself, I quite like what I call outlining, which is to use a 1A Roman numeral 1 big A small a to help me plan out my paragraphs. Paragraph 1, paragraph 2, 1A is the first point, 1AI is the evaluation I want to make on this, 1AII, Roman numeral 2, is the further evaluation, the further extension. That can help me quickly plan things out. No full sentences, just point form through it all. I know spider diagrams or mind maps can be useful to students. Tables can be useful to students, pros and cons lists and things like that. Those can all be useful. I put here evaluate and develop because I think this is the moment where, from your annotations, from your reading, you need to really start putting down where can you extend, where can you delve deeper, where can you make judgments, where can you weigh up things. If you do not do that at this stage, it is highly unlikely that it is going to find its way into your final written work. If you have not annotated and you have not planned to say more than what is directly given in the text, you are probably just going to reproduce in a new form what was originally in the text. And you will not be able to achieve a high mark, a high grade, if that is what you end up doing. Okay. Also, to edit. This is important. Writing is a difficult task. We make mistakes. The best of writers make mistakes. J.K. Rowling, thankfully, has a whole team of editors provided to her by the publishing house, which go through her work and do all the editing. In the exam, it's just you. You need to have the mindset of that there are going to be mistakes. Right? Many students struggle with this as well. They have the mindset of, I've written it, I think it's good, so what more can I do? You need to be critical of yourself. It's hard to be self-critical, but you need to be critical about your writing. And once you finish this, to go through, obviously tighten up on all your spelling, punctuation, and grammar, but also just checking that there is a good flow, that all of your ideas make sense. You know, you might have a bit of time at the end to just add in 1 or 2 more lines, take out a weak idea, strengthen it. Okay, there's an opportunity to improve your writing at the end of it. And editing always improves writing. If you do editing well, it will always improve your writing. Okay. So here's an example of a directed writing question. This is from November and October in 2024. This is paper 21. If you have the past papers with you at home, feel free to look this one up. And I will not be able to provide the insert texts as a result of space and just time of reading them and going over them, but I will show you some. I do have excerpts from the text. So this is what it looks like. It's I want to focus on the bottom area of it. I've got it again reproduced here, a bit bigger. But just the end parts, we need to write about 250 to 350 words. And then there are these 15 marks available for the content of your answer, right? So that you've dealt with the ideas of the text well, and 25 marks for the quality of your writing. And here we are talking more about the tone, the use of rhetorical devices, the inventive use of punctuation, and of course your spelling, your spelling and your grammar is important. But here is also your organizational, that you've reorganized. I spoke about the deconstruct to reconstruct. This is where that mark is also adjudicated. So it makes up the majority of this mark, 25. So it's not just about your spelling, punctuation, and grammar. That is a small part of it. A lot more of it is about the organization, the style, the tone, and those things. All right, let's have a look at the question itself, the meat of it. All right, so it says we need to write a magazine article for young people with the title "Music Matters." In your article, you should, and they usually say something exactly like this or similar, you should evaluate the views, attitudes, and opinions given in both texts. Give your own views based on what you have read about the best ways to inspire young people to become involved with music. All right, so let's have a look at what information we can get from this. All right, we know magazine article. There are particular format requirements, bylines. They've given us a title, Music Matters. I even encourage students to sometimes have like a fake photo, because magazine articles often come with pictures with them, so they can make like a picture frame within the writing. They don't actually have to draw anything. They can just write picture here, right? It shows to the examiner that you are aware of the requirements of this text. You could also write in columns, in the different columns. It's a common thing we see in magazines. And if we consider magazine paragraphs, they are usually a little bit shorter, not quite the shortness of news reports, but they're a little bit shorter, more compact, more contained. They keep the reader reading by keeping them short. So all of those things need to be in your mind. There's a lot more to it. This is not a lesson about the formats and the requirements of magazine writing. This is more about just general directed writing. Right, so that's the first bit of information, magazine article. Then it says for young people. So now we know we have an audience, right? We have young people. This is quite broad. What is a young person? Is a 2-year-old a young person? Well, maybe that's a bit too young. Okay, we think that with this, we're probably going to be writing at an age group of maybe 14 to 20. Okay, young people, maybe a little bit more on either side of that. All right, so we're not trying to write an academic article in which we are explaining in detail the benefits neurologically to people who play music or practice an instrument. But we do not want to make it too simple. Teenagers do not like to be talked down to. They like to feel like they are smart. So we need to also be smart, but not too smart. Okay. We've spoken about the evaluations. Okay. The last bit here that I think is of importance to us is that we need to give our views based on what you have read about the best ways to inspire young people to become involved with music. All right. We spoke about persuasive, discursive, and argumentative. And here we need to start thinking about, well, where does this fall? Okay. The word inspire, to inspire is particularly important for us to understand here. Right. So we are trying to inspire. That means we are trying to persuade. Right. So we know we need to be persuasive. And then, as I've said, always when we are trying to persuade or argue, there's a need for information. So I don't like to think about these persuasive, discursive arguments as being completely separate things. They are not completely separate. They bleed over into one another. So there is a need to be detailed in the information you provide. But first and foremost, we need to make sure that we are persuading. Okay, we need to come up with the best ways to inspire young people. All right, so let's have a look. This is an excerpt from the first text A, which is titled "My Musical History." Right, and we'll have a look at excerpt from text B as well. It's quite a different article from this one. Let's have a read. My mother's a talented pianist. She loves to play classical music. One of my earliest memories involves sitting by her piano while she played. It gave her joy and personal pride. I think she wanted the same from me. When I was just 6 years old, she enrolled me in piano lessons. I hated them. I was nervous and hated the songs I was being forced to learn. I was a kid and wanted to do other things instead. Learning to read music and play scales didn't interest me. Right, so these are the opening 2 paragraphs of text A. We already can see what kind of text it is. It's very personal to this person. Spoiler alert, not really, but spoiler alert. By the end of the text, the author of this text is a music therapist. They had rediscovered music at a later stage in their life through their friends, through rock music, not so much classical music, and ultimately found their calling and their profession in music. So it was a very, very interesting article, interesting read. Right, but just to have a little bit of a closer look at what's going on in these 2 paragraphs, we have this. It gave her joy and personal pride. All right, so to talk about implied details, what is implicit in this? Okay, obviously it states explicitly that you can find joy and find pride from learning an instrument, from playing an instrument, right? But implicit within this is that you can find a sense of purpose. Okay, it doesn't say that you can find a sense of purpose, but it seems that it gave her a sense of purpose, right? She's passing it on to her child. It was important to her. It seemed to be central to her identity in a way as a mother, right? So that's some of the thinking we're doing with the implied details, right? But let's have a look, right? Development and evaluation. What can we do with that text? All right. So in terms of development, students can expand. We want to expand on what was said in those. All right. It spoke about, they can expand on why a child might dislike structured classical lessons. So the text tells us they hated it. They were nervous, didn't like the songs, right? Didn't like to read music, didn't like to play the scale or learning to read music and play scales. It didn't interest it. They wanted to do other things instead. So we could develop this by adding in details that are not there. Okay, we could talk about how a child might be more interested in playing sport with their friends, that learning an instrument is a very solitary activity, which is difficult for a child to do. Right, being alone with an older person for 1 hour, and this person is telling you read. No, you're doing it wrong. That can be that is the challenge that this person was experiencing. So we are expanding on this idea. We are expanding on this idea of not wanting to be there, not liking songs, not liking the learning of the reading and scales. Right. Further expansion, how the pressure or parental expectations affect the child. So obviously the mother really loved playing the piano. The mother is the one who had passed this on to their child, enroll them in these lessons. So here we can talk about how a child might feel that if they are not good enough, they hear their mother playing beautiful music, they go to their piano lessons and they're plonking Baba, Black Sheep, have you any? And they it might feel like they are unable to impress their parent. Obviously, it depends on the parent. We know parents can be very, 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 very encouraging, but some parents can be quite harsh as well. We know that they can, it's not good enough, it's not good enough. What are they teaching? Why aren't you practicing enough? Why aren't you getting any better? So we could expand on something like that, right? And then the emotional experience of being forced, right? No one likes to be forced to do things, and that they feel that the individuality was maybe being crushed, or when the other friends were playing, they were being forced into this, right? Something that I want to discuss in relation to this is the idea of pathos, ethos, and logos. Okay, 3 Greek words which are central to good writing, all good writing. Okay, but particularly important for when you are trying to persuade or argue against something. Okay, pathos is related to our emotions. Ethos is usually about credibility or the ethics. Okay, it relates to the word ethics, but we often think of it as credibility. And logos, which I'm sure many of you can already spot, is about logic. Right? These are the 3 main ways in which we can try and persuade someone. We can emotionally appeal to them. Right? So in this case, we might appeal to, all of us know what it feels like to be forced, the emotional experience, or to feel the pressure of a parent, the emotions that we might feel. So we could delve into those emotions. The other one that I think could be used here is the logic, the logos. Okay, that through enforcing, you might create a barrier that leads to a child just not trying. That there's a certain logic to not trying to force something. Okay, that in fact a more hands-off, just provide some guitar or a piano and let the child explore it themselves, might be a better way to get a child interested in music rather than forcing them. Right? There's a logic that can be created here. I don't have too much to say for the credibility. I'll give you an example of credibility. It's not going to come up too much I don't have any example within this presentation, but one way in which we often use credibility in directed writing is we will have quotes from an esteemed professor from Oxford University, who has done lots of research. So if you read a magazine article about, I don't know, something, they might say, recent studies show. This is an appeal to the credibility. We believe people who have experience are more credible, and so it's a way to win an argument. If the leading author of this historical problem says that this is the solution, then we are more likely to believe that that is the solution. All right, so that's our pathos, ethos, and logos. In terms of evaluation, we need students to judge. What can they judge? Was the mother right to push their child? Right? Was quitting after expensive years a waste or a good decision? And does this contradict Text B's claim that perseverance brings benefits? All right, we haven't read Text B, but there's a whole thing about the perseverance of learning an instrument and how that can serve you well later on in life. Right? Here we might use the rhetorical device of an anecdote, a short story. We might include in this magazine article a short story about a mother who forces their child. Now, we do not want to use the exact story that we have here. We need to deconstruct this to reconstruct it, okay? But we can use this, we could make the anecdote of the child who got wrapped on the knuckles with the ruler by the horrible piano teacher, and how this leads to a hate for music. Okay, so we can use short stories, anecdotes, short stories that can help to prove our point, our emotional point, our logical point, whatever it might be. All right, so that is some of the ideas we can use. So how does this look? All right, here is what you might actually write in the directed writing. Right, being pushed into an activity before you can even stand it can drain any curiosity you might have had. A 6-year-old rarely appreciates concepts like discipline or long-term benefits, so the lessons can feel more like a chore than a joy. And you can see I've emboldened and underlined certain things here. Okay. The pushed, drained, feel more like a chore than a joy. This is an accurate choice of vocabulary and some imagery, chores here that help us tap into that ethos, the pathos, the emotional aspect of this. Okay, these words being pushed. If we had just written being asked to do an activity before you can understand, asked does not have the same weight as pushed. Being pushed into an activity, draining any curiosity, right? This idea of draining, the life being drained out of you, like Dracula sucking your blood. All right, that is emotive language. It's good language choice. It's good language and style that is helping also solidify your persuasive techniques. Okay. There is also the logic of a 6-year-old really appreciates concepts. This is tapping into our logical understanding of what a 6-year-old can or cannot understand. They can't understand discipline or long-term benefits. They can only understand the now, pretty much. Okay. Now, you might also be thinking, are we trying to encourage people to pick up an instrument, learn music? Right. What we are trying to do is trying to show what is the best possible, what are the best ways to inspire, right? And part of that is by analyzing what are some of the bad ways, right? We can't just get stuck on what works. We want to show the examiner, the person marking this, that we have a good understanding of the text, the ideas in the text. And so we also have to deal with the aspect of what doesn't work. Okay. The second one, based on our evaluation, was the mother right to push? Was quitting after the expensive years a waste or good decision? Does this contradict text B, this judging, weighing up? Although the mother believed her son would cherish the skill later, the experience seemed to have the opposite effect. Rather than nurturing musical interest, the pressure nearly extinguished it, raising doubts about whether insistence always produces perseverance. All right, here we have a very good, I've underlined the although, I should take rather than, and this raising doubts. We can see there is a good logical flow between this and a weighing up of, although there is this thing, the belief that it would be, the son would cherish the skill, that rather led to a near extinguishing of their interest. And then the final raising doubts, right? You are trying to make a strong point, and this is your final nail in the coffin, the final moment to make your strong point. This raises doubts. I've dealt with what the writers thought. I've said why this didn't really work out, and now I'm making my final point about the doubts and my final judgment, my weighing up of this. Okay, so we can see how this leads to an evaluation, a judgment, a weighing up. The weighing up of, would this be cherished or would this extinguish? And then making this final judgment. This raises doubts, right? Raising doubts is also very, 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 in terms of language and style, right? Often we don't say, in a subject like this, we don't need to make empirical yes, no decisions, all right? We often need to show the shades of gray. And by using a phrase like raising doubts, we're not saying yes or no, but it's a nice phrase that shows a good command of the language and a good command of style, right? That we are not trying to force the audience. No one likes to be forced. We've already seen this in this text. No one likes to be forced. So we're trying to lead the audience to agree with us. If we're saying it raises doubts, the audience thinks, oh, what are those doubts? Let me think about those doubts for myself. Okay. If we tell the audience, this shows why this is really bad, you'd say that to somebody and somebody will immediately think of, well, I will show you why it's really good. Okay. People are we like to be very contrary. We like to argue as humans. We do like to argue. So if someone says one thing is this, I will say that thing is not that. Right? So when we write, we just suggest there are doubts and allow the audience to fill in the blanks for you. Okay. So that's our first example. I will do another one. This is from text B. There were two texts for this one. And this is actually a speech taken. This is from a speech of a principal of a school introducing, trying to introduce a music program at their school. And it goes, music is invaluable to our children in many ways. Not just the obvious benefits for brain development, and it will change your child's life now and for the future. Music teaches perseverance and the value of hard work, demanding that we focus on details, paying attention to the sound of even a single note until we get it exactly right. Music requires precision. Music shows us that we can practice and prepare, but when performing in a concert, as in life, we must keep going no matter what mistakes happen. Music teaches children to manage failure. That failure can be small in a practice room, or it can be really big on stage in front of an audience of their peers and parents. What better education for our young future entrepreneurs? Okay, very good speech writing. All right, let's have a look at our evaluation, our development and evaluation of this text. So, development, what can we expand on? We can expand on the idea of discipline. All right. Here they refer at the end to entrepreneurs. Okay, so this gives us, they tell us that it teaches perseverance and the value of hard work, and this thing about life and making mistakes. There's a huge opportunity here to expand heavily on how an entrepreneur has to deal with market forces or whatever it might be, and how music can help somebody deal with the discipline of learning an instrument, can help someone deal with things that they'll come across in their life. All right, so there's also examples of real life situations where failure happens that I've just spoken about. We can where does this lead us? How does an entrepreneur experience failure? All right, and then why these skills might transfer to adult life. And I'll put here the word extension. When we look at the final written example, hopefully this will be a little bit clearer, the extension. All right, let's have a look at the example now, and then we'll go back to the evaluation. Performing teaches children to stay composed despite mistakes, a skill that mirrors coping with setbacks in exams or interviews. So nowhere in the original text B did it mention exams or interviews. So this is the extension. We are going beyond what the text gave us, right? It's logical. It's not just making up something that has no basis whatsoever, but it is completely new. The student is having to bring this into their own writing, right? The idea of exams and interviews, right? So are extending beyond what was originally there. All right. Let's have a look at evaluation. Students can judge, is failure actually beneficial? All right. The text spoke about failure and how we need to learn how to failure. We can challenge that. Do we really need to learn how to failure? Should we not just learn how to be successful? Is the school romanticizing hardship? Are they making it seem like, oh, it's good to fail, it's good to struggle? That is what makes good children. And do all children experience this positively? All right, we also have to obviously weigh up. For some, that failure to learn an instrument or failure to learn how to play a Bach piece might be a learning curve. For others, it might destroy their confidence. All right, and here I want us to look at the idea of concession and rebuttal. All right, also sometimes referred to as countering. If you are to argue or to persuade somebody, sometimes a very good thing is to concede part of the point, concede part of the argument to them, agree with them on part of it, only to make a stronger argument against another part of it. Okay, so we concede a part to create consensus, to create agreement between me and the audience, the person I'm dealing with. And then that connection allows me to, if you can agree with me on this, if we can agree on this, then maybe you can agree with me on this thing I disagree with you about. All right, so let's have a look. While learning to manage failure is valuable, concession, it is valuable. The head teacher overlooks the responsibility that public mistakes can humiliate rather than strengthen some students. So we're conceding, and then we're coming with a rebuttal. We are countering that original concession, that he is overlooking the idea of humiliation, right? There is a major error, though, a major error in this, in what has happened here, right? The head teacher, right? In your magazine article that you're writing, you are writing a completely new magazine article. The audience that is reading this has not read text A and text B. They do not know who you mean by the head teacher. We read text B. We read it in the exam. We know that it's the head teacher giving this address. This is something that students often make the mistake, is that they refer too directly to the text that they are dealing with. Okay. They might even say, in text A, it is said, you cannot refer to text A. All right. In text B, they make the argument, you cannot say in text. You need to repackage all of this into a completely new article, that as if the person who is going to read this has never read what you have just read. Okay, so they do not know what you mean by text A, text B, and in this case, what you mean by the head teacher. Okay, so that is it for today's lesson. Not really lesson, but just overview of directed writing. I hope you found it useful. This is a difficult task. What I always tell my students, the most important thing you should be doing is read. I have magazines at the back of my class. If you don't have magazines at home, Taobao has lots of magazines for you. Buy your National Geographics, buy the New Yorker, buy whatever magazines you might want to. Start reading lots, start seeing what good writing is. And you see enough good writing and you're likely to produce some good writing yourself. Okay. Which school are we? We are, our school is called Dacheng Royal Bridge Academy. We are based in Dacheng in Heilongjiang province. Where are you from? Who is this? Do you know their name? Huh? Oh, okay. Okay. So yeah, here we are in Dacheng. All right. Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you all one day soon. Bye-bye.